Every niche on YouTube eventually develops the same problem. The people who are best at doing something and the people who look like they're the best at doing something are not necessarily the same people. Language learning YouTube is no exception. Its creators face a perverse incentive. Spending hundreds of hours quietly listening to Spanish doesn't give you much to show on camera. But memorizing and rehearsing short interactions in a language until they're audition ready can make for an incredible I got fluent fast video. One develops actual fluency, the other looks impressive. When language learning videos show someone delivering fast French in the streets after only 30 days, or switching effortlessly between 10 languages after 1 year, we begin to mistake polished performances for broad language ability. Fluency becomes the ability to rattle off sentences fast. It becomes something you can memorize your way into in a month if you're smart. It becomes a game of how quickly you can learn some vocab and some grammar math to be able to construct and decode sentences really fast on the fly. Nobody's saying that the ability to do that in a month isn't impressive. It is, and it's entertaining to watch. It's just a completely different skill than being able to effortlessly recognize and produce a language in a native-like way, where you don't have to decode or construct anything, you just listen and speak. In my experience, fluency and impressiveness just pull you in opposite directions. If you focus on looking impressive, you won't get fluent. And if you focus on getting fluent, you won't look very impressive. Imagine I told you that your goal was to convince an audience that you're a great guitarist in 1 year. Well, there's two very different ways of going about accomplishing that. You could spend the year becoming a genuinely great guitarist, or you could spend the year crafting a handful of performances that are explicitly meant to convince people that you're a great guitarist. If you focused on actually becoming great, you'd spend that year building your broad ability. You'd be working toward building a deep intuition of the instrument. But if you focused on performance, you'd spend that same year polishing a few songs until every note, transition, and flourish looked absolutely effortless. And if I asked both guitarists to play a song, well, the guitarist who optimized for performance would probably look more impressive. Everyone on YouTube would say they're the much better guitarist. But that doesn't mean they actually are, it just means that they optimized for a very narrow goal. When you optimize for performance, you spend your time trying to achieve perfect delivery in narrow areas. But when you optimize for broad ability, you're no longer trying to perfect isolated pieces. You're trying to become comfortable across the skill as a whole. In language learning, this is the fundamental distinction between performance and communication. The goal of performance is to impress. The goal of communication is to understand and be understood. Performance rewards perfect grammar. Communication rewards clarity. Performance rewards rehearsed delivery. Communication rewards spontaneity. Performance rewards polish. Communication rewards adaptability. Performance rewards looking like you know the language. Communication rewards actually using it. They're different things, and traditional language learners almost always seem to be training performance, while input-based learners almost always seem to be training communication. And that distinction gives us a much better way to think about fluency. Fluency shouldn't be thought of as the best you can make yourself sound. It should be thought of as how you communicate by default, when you're not trying to prove to other people how well you speak. The mental state of performance is completely different from the mental state of communication. When you're performing, your attention is turned inward. You're monitoring your grammar, your accent, your speed. You're monitoring how you sound to everybody watching. But when you're communicating, your attention turns outward. You're thinking about what the other person means, what you want them to understand, and where the conversation is going. In performance, the language itself is the object of your attention. In communication, the language is just the medium. It disappears behind what you're actually trying to say. Stuff that language learners obsess over, like perfect grammar and lightning fast recall speed. These simply aren't high on the list of importance in everyday conversation. And unless you're planning to go to the UN to give a speech in your target language, most of you watching this video simply don't need to learn to perform. All you need to learn to do is communicate. And that should change how we think about practicing speaking. If your goal, like mine was, is effortless, comfortable communication, then practicing speaking like you're auditioning for a play is counterproductive. A conversation is just not a performance. You may become better at producing polished sentences and using very impressive vocabulary and hiding your mistakes. But not only do native speakers not require that of you, it's also just not how human beings interact with each other. The best way to get fluent speaking isn't to stare at a wall and practice structures and phrases until you memorize them so well that you can recite them like Shakespeare. That's about 50 steps removed from real human communication. It might look impressive on YouTube, but it's pretty much useless on a Tinder date in Colombia or Argentina. If you want to improve your speaking a language, you can just speak. You don't need any super secret regiment. You don't need a drill sergeant standing by to correct you, to whip you when you make mistakes. You can just practice communicating like you have in your native language. Don't make it into rocket science. People consume hundreds of hours of a language and feel discouraged because their speaking doesn't sound impressive. But that's totally natural. You've been building understanding, not rehearsing a performance. Your ability to understand will develop long before your ability to perfectly express that understanding. You're like that first guitarist. You're building an intuition for the instrument instead of perfecting a single solo. Building your understanding and struggling through your ability to express it is part of that natural process. Unfortunately, that process doesn't allow you to shock the natives all that quickly. And I know people are gonna misunderstand me here and think I'm saying absolutely no grammar. I'm saying look up the grammar, look up some words, get some explanations, but don't require perfection of yourself before you're ready. Get at least 150 hours of input, find a speaking partner that makes you feel comfortable, and just start speaking. Most language learning videos I see on YouTube are just so fixated on speaking. It's always
how to speak a language fast in 3 months.
It's never how to understand a language fast in 3 months. That's because those kinds of videos simply aren't targeting people who want to make a long-term investment into a deep, durable fluency. Those videos are for people who want to look impressive at Thanksgiving. What good is speaking a language if you can't understand that language spoken back to you? I made a whole video on why I think listening is way more important than speaking when it comes to actually communicating with a native speaker. I'm gonna put that video on the screen right here. My upload schedule has been completely messed up because I'm working on this gigantic, language learning visualization, super theory dense video that I'm trying to get just right. I'm super excited about it, and the next time I see you will be in that video. I will see you there.